The integrity is not only for quality operations, it is also for manufacturing operations, and it is fundamental. As far as our industry is concerned, quality is fundamental. Quality is important because we have to make our medicines available, but they have to meet highest quality standards, and data integrity is very, very important. So we have got a great topic, and I would like to thank PQE for doing this program for us. I will also particularly like to thank Danilo and David, and they will be introduced by Shirish for all of you. With this, I would like to hand over to Shirish and thank you very much for this insightful program. Over to you, Shirish.
Thank you, Mr. Sudarshan. It's a pleasure to have all of you here. I would like to introduce first PQA Group and then the today's speakers. PQA Group is a global quality solution provider to the life sciences sector. PQE has 14 subsidiaries across the world, over 800 employees spread across all the 18 subsidiaries, all 14 subsidiaries. To give you a brief information about PQE in India, PQE has over 100 resources spread all over India and has working with many Indian as well as multinational pharmaceutical companies. And they do all kind of the remediation work as well as the quality due diligence, compliance support, investigation, due diligence. So all the factors are related to the pharmaceutical quality and manufacturing. PQA has grown very fast in India and has demonstrated capability in delivering global solutions at locally competitive rates. PQA aims to continuously expand its footprint in India and to collaborate and partner with all pharma companies in India. Before introducing the speaker, let me introduce two more people who are from PQE here. One is Mr. Abhinav Arora, who heads this India operations, and Dr. C.B. Rao, who is the ex-managing director of Hospira India and currently senior advisor to PQE. Let me introduce the first speaker of the day, Daniele Neri. He is the vice president of operation and he is based at Rome, Italy. He is graduated with degree in physics and PhD in engineering, globally recognized as an expert in the field of data integrity assurance, computer system validation and serialization, and PDA certified auditor and speaker at international seminars and events dedicated to computer system validation. He has got over a 20+ experience in managing multi-site international projects for MES, ERP, and serialization system validation. He is a member of board of PQE and partner since 2004. And he is exclusively managing the service design and scientific affairs department since 2014. He will be talking to us on data integrity specifically. He has got various project experiences. If I deal this will take another half an hour, so I'm skipping it all the time. Another speaker of the day is the David Buratti. He is a GMP GDP compliance operation director, and he is also situated at Milan, Italy. He is a graduated in chemistry at Pavia University, and he has worked for an international company very specialized in GMP and GDP compliance operation management with a proven track record of accomplishment. Since 2014, he has worked GMP GDP compliance operation director for PQE, where he has performed numerous audits and projects both in national and international environment. An effective and innovative leader with hands-on knowledge managing FDA remediation plan, projects including site QA structure assessment, site key personal leadership, skill assessment, site quality system assessment, definition of a site personal upskilling program, site continuous improvement approach assessment, CAPA management program, CAPA management revamping, deviation management revamping. So he has got extensive leadership and hands-on experience in the quality system. So I don't want to go into details. We will hear him, then we'll know what is that. So thank you, and I hand over it to Danielo. You can start with your presentation. Thank you.
So thanks, Shirish, and thanks to IPA for this kind invitation. And I'm pleased to go through this topic. I'm going to share my screen, so you can let me know if you can see my screen. There you go. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, yes, we can see.
Okay, then. So thanks again, IPA, for this kind invitation, and I'm honored to present you a hot topic. And thanks to Shirish for the presentation. As mentioned, this session is focused on a kind of hot topic in the regulatory environment, which is related to data integrity. And this applies mainly to pharmaceutical company, but also to the medical device company, meaning that is, as we will see, a very key topic for the entire life science industry. And the important thing is that you can take from this session is that practically you shall be fully aware of the importance of the data integrity, and most importantly, you may be aware of the fact that a violation of data integrity may seriously impact your company, also the existence of your company itself. So I'm not dealing to the description of myself and my company, so Sridhar has provided you already this information. So let's start thinking about data integrity, and let's start for a very key assumption. You should clearly bear in mind that basically all the pharmaceutical regulations which applies to the different stages of the product quality are oriented to ensure the patient safety within each of these steps, starting from the R&D phases up to the final distribution and monitor of the pharmacovigilance. So it is extremely important to bear in mind that within all these stages, the decisions which allows to ensure patient safety and the product quality are always based on data. So it is important to bear in mind that this is not this is a requirement which has been stated in all the GXP regulations since the beginning, as we will see. The ultimate requirement is that the regulated data, anytime a data is relied upon, is used to take a so-called GXP decisions, meaning a decision which may impact the product quality or patient safety, then this data is required to meet the so-called ALCOA plus requirements, which is a concept we will investigate within this session. For the time being, just to state that these requirements are expected to be met for each of the data you are using in order to prove that the reliability of a product and ultimately the safety, the patient safety. The current regulatory enforcement about data integrity, as we will see, has started kind of 5-6 years ago, and is extremely important because a number of regulated agencies have underlined and stressed and enforced this topic, because it is clear they have clarified how the integrity of the data, a violation of the integrity of data may undermine the trust relation between the regulated agency and the regulated firm. So anytime that integrity violation is observed, this violation will impact directly this trust between the regulated agency and the pharmaceutical company. And this is why these violations should be prevented as much as possible, because actually as reported by FDA in these slides reported on the screen, they have clarified that these violation may put, let's say, may put questions on the entire volume of data you are using in order to prove that the quality of your products and the patient safety. This position from FDA has been shared by all the regulated agencies. And here you see in this slide, in the following ones, you see the trend, meaning the sequence of documents issued by the regulated agency in order to manage these type of issues. And basically, all the, let's say, this enforcement started kind of 5 years ago, somehow, let's say 6-7 years ago. And after that, the UK Ministry of Health, the MHRA, has issued the first draft of the guidance you see reported in the slide. So here you, as from 2015, actually they have, the regulated agency have started clarifying the expectation for the data integrity. And this process has been then shared by almost all the regulated agencies, because after the UK and the Chinese, all the other regulated agencies and association of regulated agencies like the PICS have created guidance explicitly directed or focused to clarify the expectation on data integrity. And these are up to few weeks ago, where the OECD has clarified the guidances, the expectation in a dedicated guidance for the GLP environment, for the good laboratory practices. So as you can see, the regulated agency have enforced a lot this topic, because they wanted to clarify, to put black on white which are the expectations, although, as we will see, these expectations are not new, but are expectations intrinsically already included in the predicate rule, meaning in the GXP regulations. This outcome, this enforcement have not initially fixed the problem, meaning that after the creation of this guidance, these guidances, the regulated agency have kept on observing significant integrity violation, and these violations were widespread across the entire pharmaceutical, let's say, across the different stages of the pharmaceutical life cycle. And the regulated agency have clearly stated that the data integrity is not a question or an issue only of the manufacturing phase, but applies also to the R&D, so to all the clinical trials, to the data collected within the clinical trials. Is not a question only of laboratories, but applies, it does apply also to the manufacturing processes, and is not related only to the deliberate fraud, meaning that there are a number of cases, like we will see, as we will see, there are a number of cases where a violation is executed due to the lack of awareness of the operator. And this is actually what you need to fight against. So the key message I want to bring you within this section is that you need to ensure that all the operators are aware of the potential violation they can execute, and the potential consequences of these violations when these violations are observed in, by an inspector. Also take into account that these violations are not a problem only of certain areas of the world, but have been observed almost in every country, including US, including UK, which are, let's say, those areas where, let me say, the culture of quality is most enforced. But as I was saying before, the expectation for data integrity are not a new rule, so shall be not considered as an additional rule on top of the existing ones, because these rules these expectations were already present and included in the GMP, for example, or also in the other GXP regulations related to the different stages of the pharmaceutical lives of the pharmaceutical product. And also the acronym ALCOA is not a brand new word, but actually has been created by an FDA officer, you see reported in the slide, who practically went out of space at the end of a slide in the beginning of the 90s. So the important point is that the data integrity concept, the data integrity expectations are not something new for the pharmaceutical environment. It's just, let's say, an enforcement of existing rules already addressed by the current regulations. And as you see in the slide, you can also trace these expectations, and you can find out in the regulations where these expectations are stated. Actually, these effort from the regulated agency has not yet fixed the problem, because as I was saying, and these are slides presented by the UK agency 2 years ago, still the data integrity violations are still observed within the inspections. This means that the problems we are going to see in this session are still detected by inspector, and all the resulting issues are still managed by the regulated agencies. And this is something which is very uncommon with respect to all the others regulatory issues observed within the last 20 years by the regulated agencies, meaning that differently from all the other issues, data integrity is still observed irrespective of the fact that the guidances, explicit guidances have been issued. So while for other topics, whenever a regulated agency observes a problem and then creates a guidance in order to fix this problem, then the regulated agency starts observing a decrease in the observation about this topic. Well, this simple mechanism does not work for data integrity. So despite the presence of the issue of the guidances, this problem is still observed. And the latest guidance, issued again 3 weeks ago by the WHO, they have clarified, let's say in a nutshell, which are the main root cause. And practically, you may have let's say the violation in the integrity of regulated data whenever you rely too much on the human practices, meaning that you rely on the, let's say, awareness of the operator and on the correctness of the operator. If you have a poorly defined procedure, or you have too much complex processes, if you are using a system, computer systems, which are not able to meet the regulatory requirements, as we will flow, if the data are not properly reviewed and monitored. And on top of that, meaning the last and maybe most important root cause is the pressure on the resources. Obviously, if you put pressure on resources, meaning in order, and you require the resources to complete all the processes, and you measure the performance of resources on the number of operations completed, then you may face cases where the operator will shortcut some process in order to keep this performance index. And this problem, as I was saying, is continuously observed by all the regulated agencies. Here you see an example from the warning letters issued by FDA. So let's really into the detail, and let's start talking about what is the data integrity, which are the expectations associated to the data integrity. So the main assumption, the main expectation is the one I was mentioning before. So the expectation from the regulator is that any time a data is generated and used to make a GXP decision, then this data shall be trustworthy and reliable. This means that the data shall meet the ALCOA requirements. You see reported on the slide. Now we will drill down into these requirements, and you can ensure that the ALCOA requirements are met whenever the life cycle of the regulated data is controlled, is including all the control measures to ensure the reliability of the record within the entire life cycle, meaning from the creation of the data up to the archiving of the data. So you should take into account that the data used in order to take regulated decisions are nested, usually nested, meaning that in order to ensure that an API is reliable, you rely upon the certificate of analysis. But this certificate of analysis is created relying upon data maintained by, collected through the laboratory processes, and including all the analytical determinations. The analytical determinations are created based upon the calibration of an instrument. So you can easily understand how a process executed within the manufacturing and laboratory operations or distribution in a pharmaceutical company is relying on data, and these data are relying on other data. So it is important to understand that your processes might be very complex, and you can have data which are used by a process to create other data, which is then used to determine a quality attribute of the product. So it is important to bear in mind that the expectations for data integrity applies to all the regulated data, regardless the format of this data, meaning that the expectation applies to the electronic records maintained by computer systems, and also for all the paper records manually created in order to monitor a process, to execute and activities determined as needed in order to ensure the product quality and patient safety. So it is important that your processes are well analyzed in order to determine which are the data used by each process, and to ensure that these data are reliable. Again, either if they are managed in a computerized system, or managed or created manually through paper. And so it is important also to bear in mind that some data are some regulated data are dynamic, meaning that their intrinsic the information carried out by the electronic data, by the data, can be used only in an electronic format. So anytime you want to rely, you create an electronic records, you print out the relevant report, and you discard the electronic records, you should bear in mind that you should consider that you are executing a violation. And you are executing a violation because the electronic record, or sorry, the paper record is not equivalent to electronic one. Because, for example, if you take an analytical instrument, like in the example reported in the slide, you can easily understand that in order to have the possibility to reprocess a data, you need the electronic record. So the corresponding paper record is not does not allow to is not a true copy of the electronic records. So the the amount of scientific information stored into the electronic records is much wider than the data printed out on a report. And this is why, except for the extremely simple instrument, the general expectation is that the electronic records is maintained. So let's see what these ALCOA principles mean from a practical perspective, and let's analyze each of them. So the first one is the attributability, meaning that a record is required to be attributable, meaning that anytime a record is captured, you can identify the operator who has originated this record. And you see in the bottom part of the slide how this requirement reflects on electronic records and paper records. So take into account the intrinsic difference between the two media, let's say. So for the paper records, the expectation is that anytime a record is filled out, a paper record is filled out, you have the identification of the operator, meaning through initials or through full signatures. In case of electronic records, this requirement reflects to the fact that any operator in a computer system shall have a unique user logon, so that all the operations executed by the operator into the system are easily traceable back to the operator. And this means that the system is including an automatic functionality termed audit trail, which allows to record all the operations executed to data by the operator. This means that you can recreate the chain of events related to a data and identify the operators who has executed each of these events. Then we have the other ones, the ones related to the let's say availability of the records. So a record is required to be legible, enduring, and available, and this basically means that the records shall be available within, shall be collected, shall be retrievable and understandable within the entire retention period. This means that you should ensure that the media you are using to record your data is durable over time, that you are using you are implementing good documentation practices to ensure that a record is legible even in those cases where it is corrected, so it is amended, and that that regulated records are properly archived. So if we deal with the paper records, you need to ensure that the paper records are always available within the retention period. And the retention period, as you may already know, is somehow limited if we limit it to the manufacturing environment, because we are dealing with 6 years in the most cases. While if we deal with an R&D phase, the data associated to a clinical trial shall be available for a much longer period of time. So this requirement is extremely important, and you need to demonstrate, to have the capability to demonstrate that these records, that your records are meeting these type of requirements. In case of records managed through computer systems, then you need to ensure that these records are properly secured, are backed, and can be retrieved and presented to an inspector anytime it is required. The other requirement is the contemporaneous. So a record is required to be contemporaneous, meaning that a record shall be recorded as they take place. So meaning that anytime you have a record and the determination of the timestamp, this timestamp should reflect exactly the moment where this event has taken place. For the paper requirement, this means that you can ensure that all the information manually recorded on paper are recorded contemporaneously to the event, and also you can address those cases where these requirement cannot be met for particular constraints, where you have areas where you cannot bring paper, or you cannot record operation. For the computerized systems, this means that your computerized systems have allows to ensure that all the operations are recorded in the right with the right temporal reference, and that this temporal reference cannot be modified by the operator. The other two requirements are the original and complete, meaning that the record you have the regulated record shall be maintained in the original format. This means that your record should be the first capture of the information, and coming back to the topic we were discussing before, this means that you need to ensure that all the records are not duplicated, and all the records are complete, meaning are recorded with all the relevant metadata, meaning all these, let's say, attributes which allows you to use the data. So, for example, a very common and straightforward example of metadata are the lot number associated to a pH meter determination. So, obviously, if you have only the determination of the analytical determination of the pH, is useless if you cannot associate this determination to a batch, to the batch D. So these two requirements are important, because in case of one of these two requirements are violated, then again the record can be challenged as not original, and therefore a violation can be easily observed. The latest two requirements are the accurate and consistent. A record is accurate whenever the analytical determination, the numerical value included in the record is reliable. So anytime a system used to generate this analytical determination has been qualified and or validated, so that you have documented evidence about the reliability of that number, of that numerical determination. And then shall be consistent, meaning that in case, let's say, it is applied throughout the process, and so is recording on the steps of the process, all including the deviations, if any. So basically, these are the principles, and as I was saying before, these principles applies to paper records created manually and to electronic records maintained electronically, taking into account the fact that in most cases, so except for very simple case, the electronic records is the required format to be archived. So in order to ensure the reliability of the data, the pharmaceutical companies are required to implement a governance system, a data governance system, which is, let's say, which is including all the control measures you need to implement in order to ensure the integrity of data. And these measures shall be not, let's say, addressed in a dedicated procedures, but these measures should be embedded into your existing procedure. So the data integrity system shall be embedded into your quality management system. And this is important in order to also show to an inspector that the pharmaceutical company has implemented all the actions oriented to ensure the integrity of data, and to demonstrate the commitment of the management in order to properly meet these requirements. The data integrity governance should address the implementation of the so-called data integrity policy, meaning a general statement about the commitment of the management to ensure the reliability of regulated data. As I was mentioning, should embed into the routine operation. This is why I'm usually not in favor of a data integrity procedure, because there is no a procedure, only one process where you need to address to ensure that the data integrity, because the data integrity is transversal, is to be ensured in every process. So in every process, you need to define those control measures allowed to ensure data integrity. The data integrity the governance system shall also promote and include the adoption of a quality culture which allows encourages personnel to be transparent about violation, so that you can demonstrate that violations are observed and are properly investigated through a risk-based approach, which allows to also to properly commensurate the control measures with the risk associated to the data. So there is no a single control measure which fits all the processes, because each process is different, each system used in the different process is different, but most importantly also the criticality of the records created and used within each process is different. So you need to commensurate the control measures according to the criticality of records. The data integrity, the data governance system allows to decrease, to minimize the risk of data integrity violations. Data integrity the risk, which is obviously usually can be estimated based upon the three traditional factors: severity, probability, and detection. So the severity of a data integrity violation is strictly related to the criticality of the records, meaning the impact of the record to data, to product quality and patient safety. And this is due to the is an intrinsic attribute of the data which allows you to state that like a CQA or a CTP allows you to define how important is, how much important is this data with respect to the product quality. Then we have the probability of failure. The probability of failure is typically determined by the quality culture, the system functionalities, and the procedural controls, meaning that if the persons are not aware of this problem, then they are more likely to fail, to violate the integrity of data in an unintentional way. The functionality of the system, because if a system is properly configured and has all the functionalities required in place, then the data cannot be violated, ideally. And then the procedural controls. So also these three factors shall be taken into account. And as regards to the detection, a violation is detected if you execute the so-called audit trail review. So if you review continuously, periodically, all the events associated to data, if the audit trail, if the data integrity is included in the self-inspections routine program, and if there is an open environment which allows to detect and report the problems observed in one or more processes. Well, starting from this picture, then you can easily imagine, you can immediately understand where we are used to start from the red case, where the severity of data is high because it's usually the severity of data is unknown, so there is no a real classification of data according to the relevant criticality. The probability of failure is high because the systems are not well equipped. The operators are not aware of the integrity, and generally there is a poor record management. And the detection is low because if there is a violation, no one will be able to detect it. And when you implement the data governance system, meaning when you implement all these measures, then you can decrease the probability of a violation, and you can increase the probability of the detectability of a violation. And this means that through this governance system, you can lower the risk to a reasonable level. So practically, in order to summarize, the data governance system is the set of control measures you implement in order to decrease this risk. Because usually the risk for integrity violation is too high, and you can decrease this risk through the control measures we have seen so far. It is important to bear in mind that you need to also assess your systems and processes in order to ensure the integrity of your data, and again, including either electronic records and paper records. And for these two type of records, you can, let's say, you can apply different types of analysis, because as we have seen, the ALCOA plus requirement are differently applied depending on the type of formats. So if we deal with a paper record, then you need to ensure that this record is actually fitting and meeting the ALCOA plus requirement with the, let's say, the basic questions you see reported in the slide, which allows to ensure that a paper record is reliable, is meeting the ALCOA plus requirement. Take into account the fact that in a number of cases, the violations are very hidden. So you need to ensure a review of your records so that you can detect all these violations. For example, if you take this example, this paper sheet of the paper batch record is full of violations. So in this case, you can see how even, let's say, very simple and straightforward integrity of the data. And for example, this type of errors can be directly challenged by the inspector. For electronic records, you need to ensure that, meaning that the data are secured, are protected, and are traceable, and are, let's say, attributable through the electronic signature. And on top of that, in order to ensure that the records are reliable, you need to ensure that the system is properly validated. A general caveat is about the so-called domino effect, which is important to bear in mind because nowadays there are a number of companies are usually not isolated. There is not only one site of a company like 20 or something years ago, but there is a network of companies, so of sites. So usually a pharmaceutical company has different sites across the world. And recently the regulated agency, FDA in this case, the US one, has clearly stated the risk for a domino effect, meaning that you may have, if a site is observed as not meeting this requirement, and therefore if a violation has been observed in a site, then all the other sites might be affected, meaning that the level of scrutiny in the other side may increase. And most importantly, the FDA is keep on mentioning the fact that in case also let's say there is a correlation between the different data created in the different stages of the pharmaceutical life cycle, meaning that in case a deviation is observed in the manufacturing environment, they will challenge, they will re-verify also the data submitted by the pharmaceutical industry, by the pharmaceutical firm for the submission, for the approval of the data. So this means that there are these two areas, these two environments, the R&D environment up to the submission and approval, and the manufacturing environment, which were somehow uncorrelated up to the last year. But now they started getting correlated, so that a violation in an area might impact the other area and vice versa. So once you have verified the compliance level of your processes, you can remediate properly the existing system. But most importantly also is very important to implement a system in a way which is compliant as from day one. And this is extremely important because the bottom line is that the integrity of a data cannot be increased. So if the integrity of data is lost in one or more steps of the related data life cycle, then you cannot increase anymore. So it's extremely important that the systems are implemented and in a compliant way, meaning that the regulated records are identified upfront before the use of the system within the validation life cycle, and you have identified properly all the resulting regulated requirements which have been determined as applicable to this data, and you have, and your validation process is including evidence of the compliance of the system against the regulatory expectations, meaning that if we want to have a very straightforward example, this means that if you have a system which is determined as maintaining regulated data, then you cannot only state that the audit trail functionality is present, but you need to have tests in order to show, to have the evidence that the audit trail functionality is working properly. And this is something to be well bear in mind for all the data, particularly for all the systems, particularly for those systems in the manufacturing environment, because in this case it is somehow more complicated to understand the regulated records and to understand the resulting electronic regulated requirements, like in this example for the DCS, which is a complex system, and you need to ensure that for the requirements, the data integrity requirements reported here in red, are correctly addressed within the validation life cycle. Same for the another important system in the manufacturing environment, which is the MES, so the manufacturing execution system. Also in this case, the MES is extremely important because it allows to fix a number of system gaps in the manufacturing environment. But this system should be correctly and adequately implemented and validated, so that you can rely on the system, on the records maintained by the MES, let's say in place of the records maintained by the PCS, by the equipments, the process control systems, usually interfaced with the system. And this approach shall be is recommended to be implemented for every system. And this means that whenever you have a system in the manufacturing environment, you need to identify which are the regulated records maintained by the system, created and maintained and used by the system. And for each of these records, you need to ensure that these records are meeting the ALCOA Plus requirements. This means that the system allows to ensure the security of the records, including the relevant segregation of duties, that the system allows to have an automated electronic audit trail. System data are backed and archived properly, and there is a secured time reference. Few words about this period, how this changes, and this has been actually clearly stated by the regulated agency. Beg your pardon. This is the presentation by the UK regulated agency, and you see here that the agency is acknowledging and are understanding, obviously, the practical problems triggered by the C-19 emergency. But it is important that also in this period you keep your records meeting your requirements, although these requirements are created at home in place of an office. So it is important that you ensure that, for example, you are not signing records only pasting a picture including your signature, the operator signature, in a file. And these from a regulatory perspective is expected to increase the importance of the data, because remote inspection will be based practically only on data, and therefore it is important that this data, the integrity of this data, can be not only ensured but also can be shown, can be demonstrated to an inspector. So I'm running out of time. So these are the, let's say, the recap of what we have stated in this session. So again, the basic caveat I want to bring to you is that you need to ensure that everyone is aware of, every operator is aware of the potential consequences of a violation, and that the management shall put all the efforts in order to ensure that, in order to be able to demonstrate that all the efforts have been implemented in order to prevent violation within your processes, which may affect product quality and patient safety. And this enforcement is expected to increase due to the C-19 emergency, due to the fact that, again, more and more your the evaluation of the pharmaceutical level of compliance will be based upon data. what I wanted to bring to you. Don't know if you have questions. We want to go to a short Q&A session.
Sure, Danilo, thanks for the session. So although we are encroaching into Davide's time, but I'm sure we can have room for a few questions. So if you all have any questions, you can put it in the chat box and I'll raise it to Danilo, sorry.
Yeah, and you can also share, we can send me any other question if you have, if you will have in the future, I mean.
I think questions we can accumulate and we can do at the end. Is it okay?
Actually, yeah. So Danilo would have to leave the meeting because of back-to-back meeting. But we can wait if you're okay for just few questions and then we can switch to Davide.
No problem. Okay, fine. If there are any issues?
Yeah, I'm seeing how we can avoid human error in effective manner by Yogendra. So the basic point is, again, to implement all the control measures to prevent this error. And firstly, to make the operator aware of the fact that some operations are considered as violation. In a nutshell, in a number of cases, the violations are not intentional. So the operator does not want to fraud, to create frauds deliberately. The important thing is that to be reminded that the operator is executing violation because is not aware of the requirement. So my very first point is to make all the operators aware. And this is not achievable through a simple training session. So it's not enough, meaning that you need to implement a training program where the operators are made aware and then continuously updated in order to have to be, let's say, aware, to make them aware of the potential violation. Then obviously the human error are human, so can be still detected in the review phase of the data life cycle and can be properly documented. The key point is that violation shall not be obscured, shall be not hidden. This is the basic point. I don't know if I have enough time for another question. So the other question is, risk assessment is a part of data integrity. Will be there a change in the ALCOA plus acronym? Actually, no, there will be not any change, because the risk assessment is a process which is, again, is also intrinsic to the entire quality management system. So again, as you, based upon risk, your process validation, the validation of your processes, or any other step of the pharmaceutical operations, also for data integrity, you need to commensurate the control measures based upon the risk associated to the data, meaning based upon the scientific information included in the data. So this is the basic point. I don't see a change in the acronym.
Dan, I would like to add.
Okay.
I'm sorry. No. I will add a comment on the first question for human error, but at the end. So I want to leave you space for, let you have space for answering the last questions.
Yeah, because again, is a question from G3J. in sterile area, if an inside person doing some in process, if inside person doing some in process check and outside person writing the same, is it acceptable because doer will not record the activity? Yes, it is acceptable, but you need to document this activity. So you need to document that the activity has been recorded by a scribe, not directly by the operator. You can provide rationale about the need of a scribe because the operator cannot record directly the event, but whenever you can describe and address these possibility in your procedure, including the relevant rationale, then yes, it is allowed. Okay, but, well, actually, we may, if you may gently send me your question to my email. I will share end of this meeting so that I can answer also offline.
Yes, I think that sounds like a good idea. I will save all the questions and send it to you separately over email, and then I can forward it to all the participants. I think that also works.
Okay, then, perfect. So again, I'm very sorry. I need to drop off for another meeting. I leave the floor to Davide. So I thank you all for your attention, and I hope to see you soon in a new event in the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. Thanks, Danilo.
Okay.
Thanks, Danilo. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
David?
Yes, I think now we can have the second session.
Yes.
Shirish sir, would you like to?
I think we already introduced him, so I request David to take it up, please.
Okay.
He's talking about the remote audits, so let us understand and let us hear him out. Thank you.
Okay. Before starting, thank you so much, everybody. Before starting with my topic, just want to add one comment to the first question asked to Danilo about how to treat human error. So Danilo has provided a solid response. I would just add the fact that you must be ready to challenge yourself and really understand which is the true nature of the human error. There are some nice and useful tools that can be used to deep dive into the human error and ask yourself and your operators whether it was a voluntary error, and if it was voluntary, why it was voluntary. There is another category, which is the learning gap, memory gap. So maybe it is because of a lack of training or lack of awareness on data integrity principles. The third big category is organizational. So you have to ask yourself if you put your people in the right, with all the necessary tools, so in the right position to execute all the activities according to data integrity and, generally speaking, GMP requirements. So beside training, you have to be very rigorous in challenging yourself when a human error will occur, in order to understand and pinpoint the true root cause. And then, as a result of this, you will define, if you get to the true root cause, you will define an effective corrective action. Okay, now I am going to share my presentation. So thanks again, everybody, for joining today. I also understand that after 1 hour of discussion around the data integrity, I will try to stimulate your attention even more, and I encourage you also to listen actively, and then please feel free to share questions or thoughts at the end of the presentation. So when I was reached out I'm sorry, I'm trying to switch to the presentation mode. I hope, okay. So when I when I was reached out to present this topic, I felt personally happy and proud from the very beginning, because this is an hot topic in this period. It is extremely critical and sensitive. To me, it is very sensitive because I represent a business unit in PQE, so the GXP Compliance Operations Business Unit, whose two most important services that we offer are the inspection readiness programs and the execution of supplier audits worldwide. So like any other company belonging to the pharmaceutical sector, we have been affected by this global issue represented by COVID-19, and so I feel really proud to discuss about how to effectively conduct remote virtual audits, because I think that we have to adjust to the surrounding environment. And as you will see from the next slides, we have to adapt ourselves to the new conditions in the most effective and rigorous manner. This is the agenda. This is the content of the short course. So after a very short background on this specific current scenario, we will explore a little bit the current regulatory framework dealing with the topic of the remote inspections. Then we will do a short comparison of the pros and cons of remote virtual audits versus the traditional on-site auditing model. Also, we will have a brief mention to the current technology capable of supporting in the most efficient and effective manner a remote virtual inspection. We will see a case study about a distant assessment, and we will arrive at the final conclusions. So, as a background, I think that we all agree that we belong to a privileged sector, because if compared to other industrial sectors, we can consider ourselves very lucky, because despite our world has been affected by COVID-19, at the same time our sector was anyway capable to continue, because we provide something that cannot be disrupted by even pandemic challenges like this one. Despite we are privileged, we have also responsibilities, because we have the responsibility to continue this business despite the challenges represented by COVID-19 and the disruptions of the service caused by COVID-19. So in terms of challenges, of course, the COVID-19 had an impact on the supply chain. So this is one of the biggest impact of COVID-19. The second impact is the limitation of personnel movement. Again, also, this is a challenge. This is a challenge for you working in the pharmaceutical industry, and this is a challenge for consulting companies like PQE, because supporting our clients on site has been traditionally, historically, always we thought it was the most effective manner to help you in solving your issues. There is an impact also of coronavirus on new drug applications, because all the companies that had in the pipeline new products and were aiming to enter new markets like US or Europe, in this period of down and travel restrictions, they faced these companies have faced a delay in the approval of new drug applications, and the situation is still unclear. So there are companies awaiting to see which is the future of their new products, the products that they want to launch in the new markets. And finally, the last impact is represented by the challenges to perform an effective supplier qualification and supplier monitoring program, because of course international and also in some occasions also local travel is restricted. So it is not possible to go on site and to perform an audit to a supplier of any kind of GMP material. And so because the visit on site represents a risk to all the people involved. So it is a risk for the company being audited, and of course it is a risk for the auditor himself. Okay, so now we can have a look at current regulatory framework. So specifically, what changed in the regulatory framework since the beginning of March, when the lockdown and travel restrictions started to become a global issue. So first of all, we have to recognize that in terms of auditing has been in some specific GXP areas, remote auditing has been always considered as an acceptable alternate practice. So specifically for pharmacovigilance and clinical audits, remote virtual audits was really a possible alternate solution. In the GMP world, remote auditing has never been considered as an acceptable, reliable solution, because in the GMP area, one of the key points is to visually assess the status of the facility, and that was historically considered a big issue to be executed remotely. Nowadays, and you will see from the next slides, even the regulators have changed their mindset and their attitude, and despite performing a remote inspection or allowing remote audits is not considered the preferred way to perform audits, it is now being considered an acceptable practice, also because of the current situation. So let's start to see first the position of the European Medicine Agency. So the EMA was one of the first regulatory authority to publish a guidance in order to help all the pharmaceutical companies to navigate through this period of big uncertainty. So there was a first issue of this guidance, that is mentioned in the slide, issued in April, and then there were subsequent updates. The latest one, I believe, it is dated end of July, beginning of August. And the purpose of this guidance, which is structured as a kind of question and answer document, is really to provide guidance to all the key stakeholders on how to adapt, how to allow some flexibility on the interpretation of regulations to address the global challenge of COVID-19. And specifically, we will focus on those points of the guidance that deal with remote inspection. So the first topic, the first important topic addressed by this guidance is that the agency recognized the need to extend the validity of GMP certificates because of the fact that one of the biggest challenge represented by COVID-19 could be the drug shortages, so the unavailability of medicines to the patient. For this reason, the EMA decided to perform this significant step, deciding to extend the validity of existing GMP certificates. The guidance provides two sections, one dedicated to the sites located in the European area and one for the sites located outside the European area. The principles are basically more or less the same. So EMA has decided to extend the validity of all existing GMP certificates until the end of 2021, for all the current authorized manufacturing and importing sites of both APIs and drug products, without the need for any further action. Of course, this extension, this automatic extension, will cover only the original scope of the GMP certificate. So the agency is not willing to consider an extension of the GMP certificate valid with additional changes brought into the scope, like, for example, new medicinal products introduction or new buildings or significant changes to existing buildings. The other key message for the European for European state members is that in case of new sites facilities never being inspected in the past, the agency provided the statement that they are willing to theoretically accept a distance assessment in order to evaluate whether this new facility could be authorized without the need for a pre-approval inspection. In any case, if this will be the case, it will be clearly stated in the certificate that the approval has been granted by means of a distant assessment. Anyway, the EMA continues with the statement that wherever possible, an on-site inspection should be always warranted as the circumstances will permit that. If the outcome of the preliminary evaluation of the agency is that the distant assessment does not allow the issuance of a GMP certificate, that site will not be approved and an on-site inspection will be required to continue the approval process of the new drug. So let's consider now the case of the sites located outside the European Union. The principles are really the same. So all those companies, all those manufacturing sites of active substances or finished products that have a valid GMP certificate expiring in the next month will see their GMP certificate automatically extended until the end of 2021 without the need for any further action. But I have highlighted the one sentence which is not present in the section specific for sites inside the European Union. So the agency states that this will happen unless the supervisory authority will take any action that will affect the validity of the certificate. So this means that in principle, the GMP certificates can be extended provided that there will be no significant issues in this time frame, putting severe doubts on the capacity of that company to provide medicines or APIs with the right efficacy and safety. Again, like the sites located in the European Union, the automatic extension of the valid certificate of the GMP certificate will consider only the current scope. So it will not be possible for any company, for any manufacturing facility, to have an extension of the GMP certificate covering also an extension of the scope. So it will not be allowed to have new buildings or new products included in the automatic extension of the GMP certificate. Then the same comment for the new sites facilities, as we have done for the sites located in the European Union. So distant assessment are allowed. There is a mechanism of risk assessment that consider also the presence of mutual recognition agreement in place between the third country and Europe. And there is a mechanism of information gathering from the European Union, so from the European Medicine Agency, to collect a series of information and data in order to understand whether a distant assessment is possible. The GMP certificate will be granted depending on the outcome of this assessment. If it will be possible, it will be granted. Otherwise, if the distant assessment will not provide sufficient evidence of the safety and efficacy of the products manufactured in that facility, a clock stop will be triggered and an on-site inspection will be done as soon as possible. The other important point captured in this guidance of the European Medicine Agency is relevant to API supplier audit. So another very crucial statement is that the agency recognizes the possibility that on-site audits are not possible at API suppliers. So in this case, it is allowed for the QP to rely on distant assessment paper-based audits. Considering so the inputs of the distant assessment and any other possible information that they can retrieve in this period. So, for example, the outcomes of other inspections from other authorities. Of course, it is the responsibility of the QP to decide whether this remote audit provide enough evidence that the active substance is fit for purpose and is safe, and so will not pose the patient of the drug product at risk. Again, it is the responsibility of the QP to justify all the controls to ensure that this distant assessment is conducted in an effective manner, and to perform a risk assessment also to determine whether a distant assessment is really allowed, or which are the cases in where a distance assessment is not possible and an audit on site should be performed as soon as possible. And I'm pretty sure that all of you are probably already facing the outcomes of these change introduced by the EMA, because nowadays I can say, also based on the experience of PQE, that executing remote audits is definitely considered an acceptable current practice, and we are executing on behalf of our clients supplier audits worldwide. Okay, more or less the same position has been adopted by FDA, the FDA was quicker in issuing communications because already in March 2020, FDA announced that it was going to scale back both the foreign and the domestic surveillance inspections. And also introduced the concept that the agency was willing to rely upon other tools, other measures, like, for example, information collected and reviewed remotely. The key message from the FDA at that time, so in March, was that only those mission-critical inspections should have been prioritized to occur on site. And we will see later on in a following slide what is the definition of a mission-critical inspection. Sorry, I jumped. Okay, this is. In August, another communication was issued by the FDA, stating that the FDA was going to resume domestic inspections shortly. So this means that the FDA is currently now considering to resume, wherever possible, domestic inspections, while the position for foreign inspection is still very unclear. So only those mission critical. Considering the current scenario, it is not clear when different decisions will be taken, because the COVID-19 pandemic situation is still very widespread, and it is still presenting a big challenge for the international travelers, even for the domestic travelers. The FDA itself has implemented a model, so it is called the COVID-19 Advisory Rating System, has implemented a risk assessment model to determine for local domestic inspection which domestic inspections should be restarted based on the geographical region of the audited company, the geographical region of the inspector, and the actual situation of the COVID-19 pandemic. So it is a complex model taking into considerations all the risks presented by the exposure of people to direct interactions with other people. At the same time, so the FDA will continue to consider other tools, other approaches for the moment, including collecting information about other authorities. For instance, the FDA has a mutual recognition agreement in place with the European Union to accept the results of the inspections conducted by the national competent authorities. And so the FDA will continue to use this information along with any other information coming from other regulatory agencies in order to determine which are the really mission critical inspections that should be conducted anyway. So as part of this process of information gathering, data collection, the FDA will request records to the facility in order to understand if the document provided is enough to grant a remote inspection. For the PAIs, so it could be definitely easier for routine surveillance inspection. For pre-approval inspection, the possibility to have an on-site visit it will be definitely more challenging, because other risk factors shall be considered. So there is a difference between for the FDA between pre-approval inspection and routine surveillance inspections. all the information collected will help the FDA understand, together with the mission critical definition, will help the FDA understanding whether they are able to complete an inspection just from remote, or if they can do a first remote assessment and then an on-site inspection when it will be possible. FDA will also, as I said before in the previous slide, will reserve the rights to ask information to other regulators. So as part of MRAs in place, or as part anyway of other agreements in place with other countries, also as part of other confidentiality agreements, the FDA will reserve the rights to collect any kind of information on the audited company. Okay, so now let's see the definition of mission critical. So mission critical pre-approval inspections. So it is considered mission critical inspection, an inspection that will be conducted on a BTD product. So for BTD, I'm sure you're already familiar with this concept. Anyway, for BTD products, they represent the category of all those drugs that are intended to treat a serious condition, where there is preliminary evidence from preliminary clinical evidence that this product may have a substantial improvement over an existing available therapy on a given clinical endpoint. Another category of mission critical inspection is those inspections to allow to prevent drug shortages. And finally, also, it will be a mission critical inspection anytime there will be the need to approve a product that is used to diagnose, treat or prevent a serious disease where there is no other way to treat patients. So where there is no other appropriate therapy available therapy. Additional factors for determining mission critical is the safety of all those individuals involved in the inspection versus the public health benefits, of course. And also evaluate the clinical benefit and the medical necessity, as we have considered in the bullet points above. Okay, now let's have a look also to MHRA. Also, MHRA was very quick in adopting a frequent communication channel through their website to provide additional information to help from the companies to navigate in this period of big uncertainty. So the MHRA communicated through his web channel and provided, for example, an initial statement in March 2020 in line with the other agencies, stating that MHRA was going to conduct only essential inspections. One important point from the MHRA is that MHRA underlined the social responsibility of all the pharmaceutical companies in maintaining, even in this period of deferred or canceled regulatory inspections. The MHRA requested all the companies, reminded all the companies to have the big responsibility to continue to manufacture medicines with the right safety and efficacy in order to continue to provide effective medicines for patient needs. And this is a very important point to be kept in mind, because this is the big responsibility that is involving every one of us. Despite we might see a decreased regulatory pressure, we must not forget that we have any way to continue to manufacture medicines as they are intended to be done. So fit for purpose and safe. You can see from this slide that the communication was that also MHRA decided to prioritize those essential inspections. So those inspections linked to potential big patient needs and to prevent potential serious public health risk. Also, MHRA provided an update in August stating that, like FDA, MHRA is going to resume the domestic inspections starting from September and targeting to recommence a full program from October. Nowadays, it is difficult to foresee if the full program will recommence in October because the COVID-19 pandemic situation is still very widespread. But the idea is anyway to start at least resuming those domestic inspections. And it is, I have included some concepts which are, I think, it can be very helpful for this audience, for you, to bear in mind those basic principles to be considered when receiving a request for a possible on-site inspection from a regulatory authority. So the MHRA is providing some useful advices. So, for example, they state that in order to mitigate the planning issues associated with arranging an on-site inspection in the period of COVID-19, all the inspection will be possibly announced with a pre-notification period of 14 days, even though the MHRA reserves the right to conduct unannounced inspection where warranted. So in case, for the cases that we already know, it will be possible, even though probably not as frequent as in normal period, that the MHRA may conduct again unannounced inspections. The other important point is that the MHRA will ask as much documentation as possible in advance. So organizations, pharmaceutical companies should be ready to have an effective documentation management system in place to be able to provide all the possible documentation upfront. It is true that anyway, the MHRA will not ask to reproduce verified copies of everything. So they also recognize the challenges related to scan a big bunch of documents. So they will work, so MHRA recognizes the need to work with the inspected company to find an effective model for remote inspection. So they will get in touch with the inspected company upfront in order to determine what can be provided before the inspection and in which way. In case of on-site inspection, all the necessary countermeasures to maintain social distance will be taken by the agency. So the in and close-out meetings will be kept at a minimum with the essential staff. So with the minimum staff of the audit company present. In all the other cases, it is also possible that the opening and close-out will be conducted with people from the inspected companies sitting in their room, and again, very minimum number of people attending in the inspector room. It is also expected, to maintain social distance, that the inspected company minimize the number of personnel escorting the auditors during the facility tour. I think it's also, this is a very useful information because normally there is a big number of people escorting the auditor because you want to keep everything under control, you want to take minutes, you want to be ready. Okay, be aware now that it is possible that you will be asked in case of inspections to reduce the number of people, and so as part of the preparation effort, you will have to consider this factor as well. And finally, last but not least, documents, the preferred way of sharing documents will be electronic, not only before the inspection, but also during the inspection. So wherever possible, the inspectors might ask to review the electronic version of the document, even during an on-site inspection. Okay, now let's move to the main concepts of remote virtual inspection. So the pros and cons of a remote inspection versus an on-site inspection. So let's consider, let's start with the concepts of the remote virtual audit. So what is the remote virtual audit? Essentially is the same audit process as an on-site audit. So the steps are the same. There will be a preparation, there will be an execution, there will be a report, and there will be a follow-up. Of course, there will be a different environment because there will be no facility tour. At least the facility tour will not be physically performed, but it can be done virtually by means of appropriate technology. And this is valid both in case of inspections performed by a regulatory agency, or it is valid also for audits performed by clients. So it is important to keep this in mind. The remote inspection will have the same features. So it will be an assessment wherever possible of the facility, with the constraints that we will see later on. And of course, it will be a traditional assessment of the quality management system of the company and of the procedures and the record. All those things shall continue to be provided. And probably even in a more rigorous way, because as we will see in the following slides, records in an electronic way could be, will be requested more frequently than paper records, than it was in the past when mainly essentially paper records were provided. Which are the advantages of a remote audit? There are no travel costs associated. And so there are no expenses, and there is no lost travel time. Remote audits are more flexible, can be scheduled more easily. Of course, audits minimize the risk of contamination of the auditor or of the people of the audit company. And if you want to see also the green factor, it is also a socially responsible alternative by reducing the consumption of energy. So apparently, there could be some disadvantages for a remote audit. You may state that the remote audit might limit the ability to visualize the facility, the equipment, and the processes. This is partially true, because you will not be allowed to visit all the rooms in scope of the inspection. But this can be overcome by using special cameras. So you can, if visualization of the facility will be considered necessary, you can manage anyway by using web cameras, or like we are starting to do in PQE, we are also using augmented reality smart glasses in order to perform effective virtual walkthroughs of the facilities. To be honest, there will be constraints remaining. So anytime you will be required to enter an ATEX area, so an explosion-proof area, unless you have a special cameras, you will not be allowed to enter the ATEX areas with electronic devices. So this constraint will remain, but it is possible definitely to execute virtual walkthroughs of the facilities. You might also infer the fact that records could be harder to be generated. In reality, it's the opposite. So with the remote audit and with the desktop share functions, it is even probably more easy for an inspector, for an auditor, to look at your records, and probably even with more attention and more scrutiny than before. And you have also to consider that with remote inspections, the inspector, the auditor might ask you to access directly the systems, and so to look at electronic records, which could be even more tricky than before. There is another challenge represented by remote, which is the absence. So you might miss the nonverbal communication. Okay, this can be an advantage or a disadvantage. It depends, because sometimes the inspector might not like the nonverbal communication. So they might feel that you want to take them in another direction. So in this case, they might not feel comfortable with nonverbal communication. So they might prefer a more aseptic way to conduct communications. And in this case, so a web-based audit could be better in order not to make the auditor, the inspector, uncomfortable with the nonverbal communication of people. In other cases, it is true that using the body language can improve the outcome of an inspection and can help the audited company to better communicate concepts. In all those cases, it's anyway crucial to make sure that there are no lost in translation, no lost in communications topics. So it is crucial that both the auditor and the audited company make sure that messages are delivered in the right way, and so it is important to ask clarifying questions to make sure that there are no misunderstandings between inspectors and audited company. This can be very tricky. So please bear in mind this point when facing remote inspections or when executing remote audits. Strengths and weaknesses. So we can summarize. So for an on-site inspection, of course, one possibility is that we have mentioned is to visualize factory floor and operations. So this is a big advantage for an on-site inspection. On-site inspections are also really beneficial in case of big issues, so very high-risk situations. And of course, for inspectors, the on-site inspection can be a value added because it enables to see the non-verbal communication. On the other hand, as we have already said, the weakness of an on-site inspection is the scheduling. So executing an on-site inspection requires planning, especially when doing it abroad. So arranging an on-site audit can lead the company to significant delays in the auditing program. The other weakness of an on-site inspection is that often records are provided in a paper-based manner. In this case, the inspector might miss the features of the computerized systems. And again, we have already discussed about the challenges due to travel expenses and labor costs. Which are the pros and cons of a virtual audit? We have already, so just in a summary, it is it gives you more flexibility because it can be arranged quicker than an on-site audit. So it might meet any need to perform a for-cause audit. You can access electronic records, as we have mentioned, more easily than before. And also level the playing field. So the inspector and the auditees, so the subject matter experts, are on the same page, regardless of the attitude of a person to speak for public speaking. Weaknesses. In order to execute an effective remote audit, you have to have the right technology, otherwise you will not be supported. So you have to have good broadband internet. Network speed. You need to use cameras. You have to recognize that you will miss the nonverbal communication. In case of a for-cause surprise audit, of course, the remote inspection is not the most appropriate tool. And last but not least, time zone issue can be a factor. So if you have to audit, you are located in India, you have to perform a remote inspection of a contract laboratory located in US, it can be a challenge due to time zone constraints. So now, since I don't want to run out of time, just few words about the appropriate technology to be used. So nowadays, it is valid. So it is valid for audits, but I bring also my personal experience. I have 3 daughters that attended remote school sessions. I didn't thought it was possible and effective at the beginning, but at the end, the very end, it was definitely possible to attend these web sessions. And just another funny thing, my first daughter is a dancer, and she's attending a dance academy, and she attended a web-based dance academy course from March to June. So everything is possible with the appropriate technology, believe me. So in this case, you have to plan for virtual communications, for remote audits. You have to arrange for proper tools, like having collaborative rooms. There are a lot of tools that can be used, a lot of systems. Skype is one of the possible tools that can be used. There is WebEx, there is Zoom technology, there is Microsoft Teams, GoToMeeting. So plenty of opportunities for video conferencing and sharing information without extra cost. And you have to just understand if you have the right level of security for information sharing. A list of some equipment needed, very simple. Make sure that you have the latest available versions of the web browsers, operative system, cable modems, processors, and computer headsets. So you have to have everything in place in order to facilitate the execution of the remote audit, either in case you are the auditor or in case you are the inspect company. You have to facilitate as much as possible this process. Also, internet speed is a factor. Network security is another factor. So you have to make sure that if you are sharing information over the internet, you are adequately protected with your internet connections, and it is also warranted to use a virtual private network. Another important factor to keep in mind is to have your computers up to speed with antivirus. And then finally select the most appropriate collaborative room application based on your needs. Okay. I said before that you can use cameras. So you can decide to conduct a pure paper-based assessment. or you can decide to perform a virtual facility walkthrough. You can use cameras, you can use smart glasses, and PQE, for example, is adopting both tools to perform virtual facility walkthroughs wherever possible. Again, in order to do that, you need to have appropriate technology allowing you to have a stable connection and a stable communication between the auditor and the person wearing the camera or wearing the smart glasses. Very simple case study. Don't think that the distance assessment will be effective every time. There has been a case in May where the Austrian authority suspended a GMP certificate of a local company because of significant violations and significant state of non-compliance. So it was a distance assessment conducted, and despite all the things that we have said in the previous slides, this distance assessment failed because the company was not able to provide enough evidence of the robustness of its quality management system and validation practices. So as a result of this inspection failure, the GMP certificate was completely revoked. So don't think that a distant assessment from a regulatory authority will be a success by default. Okay, conclusions. Speaking of regulatory inspections, be ready at any time, either for an on-site inspection or for a remote inspection. In this second case, make sure to facilitate arrangements with the health authority in order to have a smooth and successful process, considering all the points that we have discussed in the slides before. If you are going to decide whether to perform a remote auditing, to implement a remote auditing program of your suppliers, you can execute a risk-based exercise. And you can decide which suppliers might need an on-site portion of the audit, and which suppliers, based on a risk assessment, might allow you to perform a remote assessment or virtual assessment. Please bear in mind that there are no GMP regulations, standards, and guidances prohibiting you to execute remote virtual audits. The most important thing that you have to demonstrate is that you have appropriate controls in place to exercise your oversight on your suppliers. A simple risk-based approach will be based on establishing the reliance of the country, so the capability of the national competent authority, collecting information on the company, so evaluate which is the performance of your supplier, if they have a valid GMP certificate issued by the national competent authority, evaluate the previous audit outcomes, and at the very end, you can decide whether you can allow and execute a remote assessment or you still need an on-site inspection. Probably an on-site inspection will be required in these circumstances. So if your supplier is failing to provide you with the requested information, or if there is no inspection history for the site, or if the site is not licensed by any hosting national competent authority. Okay, that's it. I hope that I have provided you with a nice framework of the current situation, and also hope that you are aware of the current regulatory expectations, and also of the current technologies and capabilities in place to allow you to perform remote audits or to host remote audits in the most efficient and effective manner.